Welcome to the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show with Larry Lawson. As a former career law enforcement officer and law enforcement educator, Larry focuses on the use of tried and true law enforcement investigative techniques in conducting paranormal investigations. Despite his experience and training, Larry also keeps an open mind to discussions on topics that deal with evidence that are not quite as physical in nature. Paranormal Stakeout guests are professionals in the field of the paranormal and parapsychology, conducting the investigations and research needed to further the cause of paranormal study. Larry advocates an agenda of standardization of structure and training in the field of paranormal investigation and research for the purpose of one day being able to produce the evidence needed to convince a jury of the existence of the paranormal. Whether it is ghosts, UFOs, unsolved mysteries, hauntings or cryptids, no topic is beyond the investigative reach of Larry Lawson and the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show team. Now, here is the host of the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show, Larry Lawson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout. I'm your host, Larry Lawson, coming to you from the headquarters of the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation and Indian River Hauntings in beautiful Vero Beach, Florida. So glad to have you all here tonight. This is a show where we talk about everything that's paranormal, not just ghosts, but UFOs, cryptids, and anything else in between. So glad you're here to join us, and I've got a great guest for you tonight. I think you're going to enjoy it. But before we get going, I want to chat a little bit about how you can find out a little bit more about my organization, the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. You can check us out at paranormalfbi.com or Indian River Hauntings, which is our outreach, you might say, at indianriverhauntings.com. You can also catch us on Facebook on both those titles, Indian River Hauntings and FBPI. And you can catch us on YouTube if you want to see some of our investigations and the things that we're up to. You can go to our YouTube channel, Indian River Hauntings. Now, we've got something else that we're trying to do here, and I want to invite you, my audience, to send in questions that we're going to answer at the beginning of each show. To do that, you just get a hold of us at ghostguy@paranormalstakeout.com. Send us your questions, and you'll actually get a form, and you'll send your questions into us, and we'll answer them right here on the show. So let us know what your thoughts are, what your comments are, your experiences, and questions you might have about the paranormal. So with that, let's get on to our guest. I've got a really interesting gentleman with us tonight. He's a good friend, just like me, a retired cop from New Mexico. So it's a little bit different than what we have here in Florida. Ike Ensey, also known as the Paracop, is joining us. Ike kind of took the same career path I did. Started off in corrections, did some supervisory work in corrections, including running the special operations team for the facility that he was in. He then became a patrol deputy, patrol supervisor, and then, just like I did, oddly enough, became an investigator for the prosecutor's office, district attorney's office, spent some time there, and he ended his 27-year career as the chief of police in Moriarty, New Mexico, after coming up the ranks there a little bit. So he's from Bavaria. Oddly enough, he's from Germany, and he spent about some time living in a 200-year-old haunted house in Bavaria. So we'll talk about that tonight. Ike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a great show. Thank you.
Now, you're out there in New Mexico right now, and you've just informed me that it is snowing.
Yes. Yesterday was 65. Today it's snowing.
So if I told you it was 75 here and sunny, you wouldn't be all that impressed. Huh?
Yeah, I don't want to hear it.
So we're both cops. We've both seen things. We've both experienced things on the street. I've heard some of your stories. They're pretty fantastic. You're in a different area. Of course, I deal with pirates and things like that on the Treasure Coast here of Florida. You deal with a whole different type of entities, if you will, everything from things that with the Native Americans, as well as mines and gold mines and things like that. So tell us, let our audience know, how did this all begin for you? How did you get interested in the paranormal?
For me, it started at a really young age, I think. Like you said in the beginning, I was I grew up in an old farmhouse in Germany, and there was always things going bump in the night, and there was four of us, me and three sisters, and there was always things happening we couldn't explain. So I was always curious. I mean, right from day one, I don't even remember when it started. So it's just been a lifelong thing for me, really. And as I progressed through the years, just more and more weird stuff kept happening to me. So
Anything as a kid that really, because so many things happen to individuals when they're children. Anything that really strikes you as the defining moment?
there were so many things that happened in that old farmhouse of ours. It's hard just to pick one, but everything from doors opening and closing by themselves, shadow figures, and that's long before shadow figures became a keyword. Nobody knew. We just seen a shadowy person. Um, Noises at night, things moving. You set something down, it'd be gone, and then you'd show up the next day. And that was a common occurrence when we were kids. It happened all the time. It happened so much that we just kind of accepted it. We knew it was a ghost.
Well, and that's interesting. Coming from a European culture, growing up in Europe, in Germany, how how did the how did people look at the paranormal then? Was it accepted? Here it really didn't pick up and become a generally accepted concept, if you will, until the last 20, 30 years, maybe. I mean, that people obviously investigated. But what about Germany? Was it different there? Did people just naturally accept it?
It was much more accepted over there than here by far. Don't ask me why, but you think about it. Most ghost stories, all your Christmas ghost stories, all that stuff, all your fairy tales, all come out of Germany.
Hmm.
So ghostly people over there. I mean, it was just a common thing.
And what is Geist or Geister is the German
Geist,
name for Geist? Okay.
Geist, as a poltergeist.
Right, right. Now the Slender Man, we've all heard of the stories about Slender Man, and that made a big splash here a few years ago. That's actually a German story too, is it not? Or do I have that wrong?
I'm not sure about that. I don't
Okay,
know. I've
okay,
never
so
heard of it in Germany. I never heard of a Slender Man while I was there. So
okay,
I
okay.
don't
Well,
know.
so here you are. You end up coming to the States as a young man. You did a lot of different things, and you end up in the New Mexico area. Uh, became law enforcement officer. Did this stuff continue? Did
Oh,
these experiences continue?
absolutely. It was just kind of almost like it followed us, although I know it didn't because this was a whole different. The things we experienced in Germany never felt like they were malicious. It never felt like it was going to hurt us. It was just something that you lived with, almost accepted it. Things go bump at night. At night, it was just something that went bump at night. Once we moved to New Mexico, I experienced things that were much more almost like evil per se. I mean, it didn't. You had this feeling where your hair would stand up, and it was something just wasn't right.
Hmm.
And I never experienced that in Germany. I've always experienced it here, though.
And your dad was an American military officer, if memory serves, correct? And
Yes.
that's how you ended up back here. When you say malevolent, that's kind of interesting. What do you recall happening that made you think that this was evil or something that might be trying to harm you? Do you have a specific memory at all?
Well, later on in life, I think when I was a deputy, I think it was the first time I've really experienced an entity or something out there that was not happy with what I was doing, and we messed with it. It was me and another deputy, and we taunted it a lot. It was at the sheriff's department, which was clearly haunted, and we messed with it a lot at night because we were the only two out at night. And at one point, I got really, really sick, and I had maybe a fever-induced hallucination or whatever it was, but I had probably the clearest vision I've ever had, and it was a spirit that came to me, and it was telling me, keep effing with me, and I'll show you what I can do. And
That's what it said?
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I had strep. I caught strep, and it was so bad. Nothing. I took two different kind of antibiotics. Nothing was getting rid of it, and I finally ended up taking the steroid. And I went to the hospital twice. And it was leading up. I was getting sick at the point where we were really taunting this spirit. We knew who it was. It was a person that got beaten to death in one of the jail cells back in the 50s. And we knew he was in there because he kept turning the lights on and off. The faucets and the sinks would turn on and off. Cell doors would open and close by themselves. Everybody knew it. Every deputy knew it. It was so bad that at nighttime, we had a rule of thumb, we'd always pair up in teams to go back to the sheriff's department because nobody would want to be in there by themselves. And we taunt this guy so much, and I think it finally hit a crest, and I got really sick. And as I was getting better, I was laying in bed watching TV, and I didn't fall asleep because my wife was right there. She said I was just staring at the TV, and that's when this voice came to me. And I was crystal clear. I was envisioning myself at the sheriff's department, staring into a cell. Everything was bright blue. That's what that voice said. And then I snapped out of it, and my wife says, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I just had the weirdest dream. Was I sleeping?" And she goes, "No, you were just staring off at the wall up at the TV." Right about that same time, my dog, I had an Australian Shepherd, was in the living room, had a seizure, which he never had before. He had a seizure, collapsed, and knocked over the Christmas tree. So my wife, Debbie's freaking out. She's in the living room. She said, his dog's name was Scooby. She goes, "Scooby just passed out in the living room and knocked over the Christmas tree." And I'm like, "I can't get out of bed. I'm still really sick." And I hear her, I tell her, "Get Scooby some water, fill up a dish of water and give him some water." And while I hear her filling up the water, the dog comes up into the bedroom, stops right next to me, and just stares at me, which is nothing I've never seen him do before. It was so surreal. It felt so real that I picked up the phone and called my partner who was working that night. And I said, "I'm done messing with this ghost at the SO. From now on, we're going to be nice to him. We're not going to taunt him or pick on him anymore." And we did. We stopped picking on him.
Well, how did you pick on him? What? I mean, you say you taunted and picked on him. How did you do that?
We were idiots. We were stupid. We'd call him all kinds of rude names. "Show yourself, you big." Yeah. Do something. Don't be a chicken shit. That kind of thing. And this was going on for weeks because we knew he was in there, and we were like little kids in the candy store. We were getting EVPs, we were getting knocks, we were getting all kinds of stuff, and we wanted more. I don't know. We're almost obsessed with it. And it reached that crescendo where it's like, it's time to stop.
And you realize taunting it may not be the best thing. I get it. Now, A lot of people may say you were sick, you had a fever, you just had a hallucination.
Yeah.
What tells you it was more than that?
Well, I'm the one who experienced it, and I know I've never experienced anything like it. I've only had 2 experiences like that, and I guarantee you, there would have been no reason for me to dream about that or anything. I was too busy being sick to think about ghost hunting or anything like that. I was truly, really sick, and this thing came to me, and there's just too many things that came together.
Well, I got to put you on hold for a second because we got to go to a break, and I've got so many more things I want to talk about and ask you about. So, folks, stay with us. We'll be back right after these messages. Ike Ensey, my guest tonight on Paranormal Stakeout. Stay tuned.
From the Canada-US border in the southern region of Niagara, traveling north in Ontario's Golden Horseshoe, then east and west of the Greater Toronto Area, there is growing awareness and excitement as more and more people are starting their day with Beautiful Mind Coffee, the delicious healthy coffee that your brain will love. Made with ethically sourced 100% Arabica coffee, Beautiful Mind Coffee is roasted and ground in small batches to ensure each bag contains a wonderful full-bodied artisan coffee. Scientifically formulated, Beautiful Mind Coffee is the only coffee blend that contains 3 herbal ingredients found to aid in boosting your daily mental clarity and focus. Maca root powder, green tea extract, and American ginseng have been selected for their ability to support good brain health. Taking care of your brain's health now can help delay or prevent the onset of cognitive dysfunction, including dementia, Alzheimer's, and more general memory loss as you get older just by enjoying the delicious flavor of our roasted coffee and herbal ingredients found exclusively in Beautiful Mind Coffee. Beautiful Mind Coffee is now available at Amazon.ca and soon to be available in selected locations near you. In Hamilton, Ontario, Beautiful Mind Coffee is now available at Livelong Wellness Clinic, located at 189 Hewson Street South. Beautiful Mind Coffee can be ordered by telephone by calling 416-436-3675 or 905-536-2450. Why have a good cup of coffee when you can have a great cup of Beautiful Mind coffee that's good for your brain? For more information on Beautiful Mind coffee, visit us online at www.beautifulmindcoffee.ca.
And we're back with my guest tonight, Paracop, Ike Ensey, retired chief of police from New Mexico, good friend and one heck of a paranormal investigator. You know, we talk a lot about ghosts on this show. I guess that's the one of the primary things that my group does. I know that you do too, but you've had some other experiences too over time that I kind of like to touch on before we get more into IDK Paranormal, because I do want to talk about your organization. But you've also had some experiences, not just with the ghosts, but with other events, such as UFOs, cattle mutilations, that type of thing. Tell us about your experience with cattle mutilations. What happened with that?
That's when I was a fairly young deputy, probably had 4 or 5 years, and I think it was happening all over the Southwest, really, all the way up into Montana and probably even up into Canada. But twice once I've got dispatched to a cattle mutilation call, and the second time a ranch hand, there was a female officer and her boyfriend was a ranch hand, and I was talking to the female officer in a neighboring town, and her boyfriend was there, and her boyfriend said, well, there's a mutilated cow on our ranch. And of course, show me, I got to see this. It's just like you see on all the shows. Both cows I've seen were both steers, range steers, meaning they're not tame. They're out there in thousands of acres of desert. Both of them were cored. Their anus was cored out. The testicles were cut off. The tongue was cut off way back in the mouth. One eye was missing. One ear was cut off. It makes no sense. And the second one I treated more like a crime scene, and we approached it from the outside, and we were looking for prints and tire tracks and predation and everything you could think of, and nothing touches these cows. They just lay there, and coyotes won't even touch them. And it makes no sense. And I actually did a report on the second one and filed it, and that's when the sheriff approached me and said I should probably not be doing that anymore. We have more important things to do. We don't have time for the boogeyman kind of stuff, and to leave it alone. And I even argued with him. I said, this rancher lost a cow. It's probably $1,500, $2,000 cow. And he just told me to leave it alone. That's a direct order. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to touch that anymore. But the mutilations were legit. I mean, in both cases, there were reports of helicopters flying around that night. And I don't know, that seems to be the common thread a lot of times with helicopters. I don't know what that means, but we've made phone calls. We tried contacting the air base to see if they were doing anything out in that neighborhood, and they weren't doing anything. Of course, they wouldn't tell us anyway. But whatever's taking these cows almost appears like they're dropping them off in that location, because there's no tire tracks, there's no footprints or anything else. And if somebody's cutting all these body parts off, there should be footprints all over the place.
Not to mention blood and that type of thing.
No blood.
Now, you got helicopters flying over. Of course, the first thing that comes to my mind, I taught cults and deviant groups investigations to cops for years. Taught them how to investigate an occult-related crime scene, mostly with young people that are just trying to be cool Satanists or whatever. Any chance that was the case here? That it was just somebody that thought they were performing some sort of ritual and took care of the cows that way? Is that possible?
We looked into that, and we kind of ruled that out, because these cows out west here in the Southwest, they run around on huge tracts of desert, thousands of acres. They become wild. They're feral cows. Mm-hmm. And if you think you can walk up to a steer out in the desert, and there was really no sign on how they killed this cow. I mean, there was no bullet hole or anything like that, So we don't even know what killed this cow to begin with. But if you think you can walk up to a cow and just start dismembering it out in the desert, you're probably in for a rude awakening.
Okay, and you mentioned the coyotes wouldn't even touch it. Are you saying that here you've got the corpse of this cow here with its genitalia cut out, its eyeball cut out, maybe an ear, but none of the rest of the cow has been touched by a predator?
They will not touch it. And that ranch hand confirmed it. He told me he's had a couple of more in the last couple of years. And he says they end up burying it. They take a backhoe and just drag it. They dig a hole and drag it over to a big hole and just bury it. In normal cases, most ranchers, what they do is they have a dead animal pile somewhere on their ranch, and they just drag, whatever animals die out there, and let coyotes, whatever, crows and vultures eat it. But he says those cows, nothing touches them.
And how many times did you actually have to deal with this that you can recall?
Twice.
And you just couldn't find any other explanation at all, because there's a lot of folks that feel that the cattle mutilations, like the crop circles, for example, all done by people trying to make a joke or make a prank or something like that. You didn't find any evidence of that at all.
There was no evidence of this because it wasn't even being reported. Like the first one was reported to me by just a regular person that happened to see it because it was fairly close to the road. The second one was reported to me by a ranch hand that worked for this rancher. The rancher didn't even want to report it. I don't understand why, because there's a lot of money involved in these cows, and maybe it's because of insurance or something. I don't know. But in general, they just accept it. They're like, well, I lost another cow. That's how it goes. And if you start asking questions like, if you start going off rail a little bit and say, did you see helicopters? And then right away it's like, oh, are you talking about cow mutilations? We don't have that nonsense around here. It's really a bizarre situation when clearly that cow laying there is a mutilated cow.
Yeah. And your boss did not want you touching this at all, right?
No, he was a rancher himself, and he's like, he was you have more important things to do. There's more important things going on besides you out there in the middle of nowhere chasing around dead cows. Leave it alone. And I didn't. And then he caught me the second time, and that was like, that's a direct order. Like, okay.
Do it again, and it'll be more than just a discussion. I get you. What do you're a detective like I am. You've spent years conducting investigations. And what do you think? What do you think this was in your gut?
It's actually, that's something that's still going on. And you hear reports of it every once in a while. And I really don't know. I don't know if the helicopters tie in, because I've seen helicopters out here do some strange stuff. I could have sworn I've seen a helicopter chase a UFO one time, and it wasn't just me, it was two other deputies. And I don't know how that all ties together. Why in the world the military would want to abduct a cow, mutilate it, and drop it back out in the field when they can just go to the nearest slaughterhouse and buy one and do whatever they want to do with it is anybody's guess.
Well, let's talk about those helicopters for a second. Were you ever able to identify them? Did they have any kind of markings on them?
Well, as you know, it's pitch dark out here at night.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And there was one incident where I was going into one of the neighboring towns, and I seen a helicopter flying real low over our road. And I'm like, wow, this guy is low. And it was a town south of us, and he landed in a field. And I pulled into the town next to another deputy, and I said, hey, did you see a freaking helicopter? And he goes, you're always seeing stuff. And I'm like, no, really. Helicopter landed over there. And I said, follow me. And we drove over there, and there's a helicopter sitting on the ground, running at full bore. I mean, it's wound up. And we blacked out our units, and we're kind of sneaking up close to it, probably 50 yards away. And we stop and we get out of our units, and we're sitting there looking at this helicopter trying to make out what it is. And all you can see is a bright red flash on it. And it was a small helicopter, like a little bird type helicopter.
Okay.
The two-seaters.
Right.
And it was just revved up full throttle, just sitting on the ground running. And I look ahead of it, and probably 200 feet ahead of it is a greenish yellow light on the ground. And we're like, what the hell is that? And this green yellow light shot straight up in the air and took off in one direction. And this little bird helicopter just starts chasing it. And they're like two dogs chasing each other all over the place. But because it was so dark, we could not tell what that thing in front of it was. But it wasn't another helicopter, because you could see the black shadow of the helicopter chasing, but the yellow-green light, all you seen was the little yellow-green light. You couldn't tell what it was. And they chased each other around for a little while, and then they took off in one direction and disappeared. And we went to dispatch, had dispatch call Kirtland Air Force Base, and they said they have nothing going on this side of the mountain once again. Who knows if that's true or not. But I have no idea what they were chasing. I'm an aviation buff, and I'm telling you, that was not another helicopter, or I don't know what that was, because we couldn't tell. But he was chasing something.
Yeah. I know your background in aviation, particularly civil aviation. So you would know the shape of a helicopter or the sound, I would assume.
That thing made no sound. All you could hear is that one helicopter.
So once again, I got to ask you, what do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. There's been a lot of reports out here when I first became a deputy of weird lights in the sky. We actually got dispatched to lights in the sky. Aircraft crashes. There'd be 3 people calling 911 saying they'd seen an aircraft go down. And we responded to a certain area, and there'd be nothing there. And we take statements from the people, and they describe in detail, it was a bright yellow light just sitting there hovering. And it used to happen out here all the time, all the time. After all, we're not that far away from Roswell.
That's true. That's true. And do you think that's connected with all this?
I don't think there's a connection. I think it just happened to crash in Roswell. There's actually several UFO crashes that happened out here. There's one in Socorro. But in the big picture, we're all within 100 miles of all of those UFO sites.
Are we getting visited, Ike, in your opinion?
I think so. I think they're here. I think so. I think we got visited probably a couple of thousand years ago, too.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you have an encounter one time with something in the trees?
We used to get a lot of calls of tree people. I started calling them tree people because, as a cop, you always like, you dispatch would be like, can you go to so-and-so, this location in the rural area somewhere? RP's claiming there's somebody in a tree. Now, RP was a reporting person. And that happened so much in like a 1-year time frame to where I said, great, another tree person call. And most often than not, you would show up at a house, and a lot of times it'd be a really nice place. Professional people, and you pull up in your police car and they come running towards you and they're pointing at the tree, and there's some people up in this tree. And I shine my spotlight up there, and there's nobody in this tree. And they would describe them in detail. There was 2 people up in the tree. My husband's seen them. The kid came out, they seen them. We told them to get out of our tree. They wouldn't leave. They didn't talk to us or anything. They're just hanging in our trees. That probably happened 20 times in a 1-year period. It was so bad. One guy tried to cut his tree down, his big ponderosa pine tree, which has a base, probably 5 foot in diameter. His chainsaw quit halfway through, which is probably a good thing because the tree would have fallen onto his house if he would have succeeded cutting it through. But he was cutting the tree down because there's people up in his trees. And as a cop, the first thing you think of is methamphetamines. These people are all on meth.
Absolutely. That's why I was going to go there. Do we have any alcohol or drugs involved here?
There was some cases where people were drinking, but in almost all cases, there were business people. There were 2 people who were scientists at the lab, at Los Alamos Labs.
Interesting.
So,
once again, how do you explain all of that? And you live in a really, really interesting area, and we're going to be taking a break in a minute or so. So I don't want to get too far into it, but I mean, you've got an abandoned Air Force radar station there, right?
correct.
Which I find quite interesting. I spent some time with you up in the gold mines up there, which were pretty spectacular. And I'm going to want to go into some detail about that when we get back, because you've had some interesting experiences in the gold mines of New Mexico. So, folks, we're going to take another break in just a second here, but I want to remind you, IDKPARANORMAL at gmail.com, I'm sorry, is a great way to get a hold of Ike. He also has a YouTube channel, IDK Paranormal on YouTube. So check that out too. But stay with us. We got more to talk about. We'll be back right after these messages. And we are back on Paranormal Stakeout. My guest tonight, Paracop Ike Ensey, retired chief of police from Moriarty, New Mexico. What an interesting place New Mexico is. I had the good fortune of spending a few days with you out there, exploring some of the interesting sites out there. And it's an interesting difference between Florida. Florida is a relatively new state when you look at places like New Mexico, where inhabitants were here too, but it's just a different type of terrain, a different feel out there. And you spent 7 years as a cop in New Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how many of your colleagues, if you had to put a percentage on it, how many of your colleagues do you think experienced things they couldn't explain, whether it be the helicopters, the mutilations, ghosts?
100%, all of them. There's
Really?
not a cop I know that hasn't experienced something. Now, will they accept it? That's a different story, but they've all experienced it.
How often do the guys and gals talk about it?
You know, when I first became a cop, it was a taboo subject. I mean, you
Absolutely,
have to be really careful. You have to be
That's
really
right.
careful. In fact, the sheriff told me to knock it off one time. He told me he's going to send me off to get re-psyched if I don't quit it, which is a death sentence back in those days.
Back in those days, it was.
But during my career, you could see it opening up. I mean, more and more. I think it had a lot to do with the TV shows. That was around the time, a lot of the ghost hunting shows started popping up, and it became more of a acceptable thing.
And I really noticed that too, when I became aware of Honolulu, Hawaii PD. It's several years ago now, but I don't know if you've seen them, but on YouTube, they've got a whole series of ghost experiences that their own officers have experienced, and they've refilmed them and put them into a format.
Yeah.
I mean, when I came on the job, and I came on a few years before you did, man, you didn't even talk about things like that.
No.
And it just seems to have grown quite a bit. You have one story, and I'd like you to share. It was about two folks on the road. They were heading somewhere, and do you remember the story? They were going somewhere. They knew about you. They knew about.
Oh, yes. Yeah. That was a really bizarre situation. I think I was a captain, or maybe chief already. I think I was captain. I was a captain. But one of our female officers got dispatched to the interstate. I-40 runs through our town here. And there was two people walking down the interstate close to the traffic line. And she goes out there just to do a welfare check. It's not against the law, but just do a welfare check, make sure they're okay, and tell them to kind of stay on the shoulder so they don't get run over. And when she comes back, I hear it clear from the call, and she comes back to the office, and she sees me right away. She goes, "You're not going to believe this." But it's an elderly, they were both Black people, and she was probably at least 75, 80. And the other guy was her son, and he's a really tall guy, probably in his early 40s or late 40s, early 50s. But she comes to the office, and she goes, "These people knew everything about me. They knew where I lived. They knew how many kids I had, everything." And I'm like, "Well, maybe are they from here?" And she goes, "No, they're from Louisiana. They're heading back to Louisiana." And one of them was pushing a shopping cart. His son was pushing a shopping cart. I'm like, "So they're homeless?" And she goes, "Yeah, but they didn't want any help because we had vouchers we'd give out, for a bus ticket or food. We'd have water, blankets, stuff like that. They didn't want anything. They didn't want to be a bother." And so I sent my lieutenant out there. I said, "Go check this out." And my lieutenant goes out there, and he comes back a little while later, and he's just as perplexed. She goes, "They knew I was freshly divorced. They know I have a girlfriend. They told me everything's going to be okay. You're going to have a child." All those things came true, by the way. I'm like, "Oh, that's crap. I got to go out there and see him now." So I drive out there. I say, it's too good to be true. So I drive out there, and they're pretty far out of town already. And as soon as they see me coming, they stop walking, and they just look at me. And her son is kind of skittish of the police. He's like, just backing up a little bit. And I'm like, hey, I'm not here to hassle you. I'm just here to talk to you. And they both come towards me, and he goes, "I know what you want." And I'm like, "What do I want?" "You want to know how we know all these things?" And I'm like, "Yeah, actually, I do." I said, "Tell me something about me." And he laughs, and they had kind of like Caribbean accents to their, they were like a Creole language. But he laughs, and he goes, "I knew that's why you were here." And I'm like, "Well, that's easy. Tell me something I don't know." And he goes, "Well, I can tell you have a son and a daughter, and I can tell you your son's in the military." And I'm like, "How the heck do you know that?" And he just laughs. And he goes, "Don't worry. They're both going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You're going to have a great long life. Is there anything else?" And the old lady's just looking at me, grinning the whole time, like, she knows something I don't know. And I'm like, "No. Is there anything I can do for you guys?" And no, we're doing fine. And they just continued walking, but there's no reason at all. These people should have known any of that stuff. Not at all.
Just more of the strange things that happen in the Great Southwest.
Yeah.
Now, so many interesting spots there. And, I mean, we've got palm trees and ocean here. You've got desert, rocks, mountains. Tell us some of the more interesting spots where you've actually obtained paranormal evidence in your neck of the woods.
Well, this whole place is, it doesn't matter where in New Mexico, and it's not probably just New Mexico, it's probably the entire Southwest. The desert is unique just because of the wide open loneliness. I think you're more in tune when you're out in the desert because there's nothing. We have these high mountains. We have climates that are comparable to Canada on their high mountains. And then we have the area I took you, gold country. So it's a mix of everything, and all of it, at one point was settled by natives and or Spaniards. There's a lot of bad stuff that has happened out here. So there's not a specific area I can think of because I've caught ghostly encounters and EVPs and stuff everywhere. Every place is.
What is the Native American influence like out there, and how does their spirituality, do you think, connect with all of this? Do you have any thoughts?
It's different.
On that?
It's different because each tribe has a different belief system. There's nothing in common with any tribe. Some tribes like crows. Other tribes, if they see a crow, they run. So it's all different. But one thing they have in common: they all believe in the spirit world, and they all believe that if you talk about it, you will manifest it. We don't have a whole lot of Navajos per se where I'm at because the reservation's 250 miles away. It's up by Farmington. The Navajo reservation is huge, and a lot of the natives trickle down this way. And back in those days, I've arrested a lot of them, and I've talked to them, I'd ask them stories. And skinwalkers, they all believe in skinwalkers. I mean, that's not even a joke to them. It's not something you would just, hey, do you believe? Absolutely, they believe in skinwalkers. Well, I've talked to Navajo Rangers, which are federal police officers that work on the reservation. And those guys are super trained. They're really high-speed cops. And every ranger I've ever talked to has seen something bizarre and believes in skinwalkers or entities. So a lot of them say, I don't know if it's a skinwalker or what it is, but there's something that's not human that lives out in the desert.
And my understanding is on the reservations, if they get a call involving some sort of spiritual entity, skinwalkers in particular, they're compelled. They must go and investigate it, from what my understanding is. So that I find that intriguing. In your spot, the gold country, you took me up into the where the gold mines are, and actually got an opportunity. And I believe on my YouTube channel, folks, I've got a little bit on there with Ike and I going into one of the gold mines, and they're old. I mean, they're old. Some of them have been reworked recently, but they're very, very old. Have you had any particular experiences in the gold mines?
A lot. Just to explain a little bit, the gold mines, that area is called Golden, New Mexico. It's in the San Pedro Mountains, and it was the first gold strike west of the Mississippi for the Europeans. But prior to that, the Spaniards mined out there like mad. They basically enslaved the native Pueblo Indians and used them as slave labor to mine for silver, gold, and lead out there. So there was a lot of bad things that happened out there. Plus, there was a pretty good population of Chinese immigrants that they used out there as slave labor, and just intense history. Some of the mine shafts I took you to date back to the 1600s. They've been reworked, and if you look at them carefully enough, the beginning you can see pick marks and axe marks in the rock, and as they go further back, then you can see more modern pneumatic tools. But the old country and that whole area is really, I have a claim out there myself, and that whole area is very spiritual. I mean, when you're out there, you just sense it in the air. Everybody that I've ever met out there working on a claim feels the exact same way. A lot of them have seen stuff, and there's definitely something going on there.
Well, you've got a lot of minerals, and I assume granite and maybe quartz out there.
It's all quartz.
Right? All quartz.
Lots of granite and quartz.
So a lot of energy may be held by these minerals. Do you think that might be part of it? Just somehow this energy is messing with your head, or do you really think it's the other side?
I don't think it's messing with your head, because quartz is a known conductor of electricity, piezoelectricity. And this whole area is mineral rich, hence it's a gold area.
Yeah.
There's not just quartz, but there's iron, there's copper, there's all kinds of mineral rich areas. So it's a huge battery, really, out there. And I don't think it's messing with your head. I think it's legit, because I've caught some EVPs out there that really make you scratch your mind. You're like, what the heck was that?
And folks can hear some of those EVPs, I believe, on your YouTube channel, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So check out IDK Paranormal on YouTube. You'll get to hear some of these really interesting EVPs I have, and I'm pretty intrigued myself. Now, we got a couple minutes before our next break, but you had an old air base that's there. Right? It's not actually an air base; it's a radar station, Air Force radar station we got to spend some time into. Do you know the history behind that and what was going on there, and if you had any experiences there?
I do know some of the history. It was built in 1951 during the Korea conflict, and I think it was closed in 1961. So it only lasted 10 years, and I think newer technology kind of made that obsolete. Mm-hmm. But it was a pretty good size. I can't remember how many people were there. 1,000 or so people lived there at one point, and now it's just ruins. You've seen it. It's just old walls standing around. But as far as experiences, I did. It's a very, very creepy place when the sun goes down. Even as a cop, we knew it, because as cops, we go out there every once in a while, and it's a very spooky, creepy place. And I did catch some really good EVPs out there one day.
Yeah, and I know when we were out there, we had some interesting experiences too. We didn't catch any EVPs, but we did. We had Chris with us via the internet, and he got some interesting. And he didn't know where we were at. We didn't tell him,
right.
But he got some things that pretty well confirmed it was a military base, and he had no idea. Excuse me. So I kind of found that interesting, and I'm looking forward to actually going back there and camping out there. We've been talking about that. So, any other particular spots in your town, like your property?
This is, like I said, this entire state is just one big ghost generator. But yes, my property also, the house I'm talking to from right now, we've just had tons of experiences in here. Everything from opening, closing doors by themselves to sounds and voices. Just 3 days ago, I was in here by myself. I clearly heard a woman's voice. I don't know what she said, but it startled me. It made me jump, and I'm like, what the heck?
Well, when I was there, I had something literally push my shoulder, if you'll remember. Yes. And no, I was not sleeping, folks. I wasn't dreaming. I was laying on my side, and something just pushed my shoulder. So pretty convinced. We're about ready to take our last break, though, my friend. Folks, stay with us. Want to talk a little bit more about IDK Paranormal, what it is, and what the future holds for Ike Ensey. So stay tuned. We'll be back right after this break.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
And we're back for a final segment. Man, this has gone quick, Ike. So many more things I wanted to go over. I just find your neck of the woods so fascinating. Maybe it's just because it's different from where I'm at, but I just found it. You said it earlier, spiritual, and I enjoyed being out there. I look forward to my next trip, and I look forward to folks hearing more about what you do and what you have out there. So, keeping that in mind, tell us a little bit about IDK Paranormal, why you do it. What you're trying to accomplish, maybe with having your show out there on YouTube.
Well, first of all, they call it the land of enchantment for a reason. That's what it's New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
But two, I started this channel to get answers. I think, I'm curious. That's the reason we became detectives. I think because we're just busybodies and we're nosy. We got to know everything.
Exactly.
And this was a good avenue for me to get answers, although it hasn't really panned out. But the YouTube channel was started with the intention of interviewing a lot of police officers, getting their stories out. And it turns out that still, if you're still an active police officer, you're not going to tell your story. You're going to tell me your story, but you're not going to want to put it on video, and you're not going to want to give me your name. So that's still a brick wall, and it's almost like you have to plague the people's officers start avoiding you because they don't want you going over there and asking them, did you experience anything? So that hasn't really worked. But so we've kind of gotten more into the adventure aspect of it, like going to gold country. We call it gold country because that's really what it is, and trying to get answers out there, going to different places, and not be exactly the same like every TV show. It's always the same thing. If you hear something, or if you hear me make a noise or throw something, we want to approach it a little bit differently and maybe a little more scientifically. But that's easier said than done because, as you know, this stuff isn't scripted. It doesn't happen when you want it to happen. You can
unless you're on a TV show or like.
Yeah, you can spend 6 hours in one place and nothing happens. You pack everything up, and on your way out to the car, something taps you on the shoulder and whispers at you. I'm like, now you want to play. It's too late now.
Well, and that's one way I describe it. It's like a stakeout, and you've been on those before. You'll sit for hours and hours and hours and nothing, and then you get 15, 20 seconds of excitement. Paranormal investigations are the same way. It takes patience and time to gather this evidence, this information.
And nobody really knows. Everybody thinks they know, but nobody knows exactly what's going on, what's causing these things, and what is happening. Nobody knows. Most of my EVPs have always happened non-solicited. When I'm asking questions, sometimes I get a response, but a lot of times I catch an EVP and it's just chiming in. I'm talking to somebody else, and suddenly there's a third voice in the conversation, and I'm like, I didn't ask for that.
And I remember the one EVP I heard that you got. It was a little boy with a bang bang.
Yeah.
That was out in Gold Country. I think you got that. In fact,
but that one gave me a little clue because I heard a door slam. There's an old shack out there, and I heard a door slam. And although it was windy, it could have been the wind. But I've been out there for like 2 hours, and I was trying to get EVPs, and I didn't get anything. This was my last stop, and I just sat down to take a break, and I heard a door slam, and I got the chills really bad. And I turned my phone recorder on just for the heck of it. I caught those 3 EVPs in a row right there.
Mm-hmm. But I think you bring up a really, really important point, and that's something that I want to bring up here, and I've brought it up in previous shows too. We truly do not know what this phenomenon is. We don't know if it's dimensional. We don't know if it's us. We don't know if it's just the other side reaching out to us. Nobody really knows. So my question to you as a fellow detective, what do you think we need to do to get over that hump, get over that wall, and start getting some answers that can tell us what this really is? Where's the evidence going to take us?
I'm not really sure, because whatever you experience, you would be hard to convince somebody else that's what it really was. Unless new technology comes out where you could scientifically document stuff with legit equipment, and that's another one of those things. I mean, how legit is your equipment? Is it subject to be contaminated from outside sources? So who knows? And other than taking a trip on DMT and going to the spirit world, Native American style, we'll probably never really know what's going on out there.
So why do we do it? Why do we do this? And I agree with you. I agree with exactly what you're saying. We may never find out. So why do we do this, Ike?
Like I said, I think we're naturally curious. We're professional rubberneckers. We're the ones who run to stuff instead of run away from it.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I want to know. I want to know what's going on out there. I want to know if the people I've lost in my life are actually out there somewhere, or are they just gone? Is it the end? I want to know. I want to know why some people die. They never come to you. I've had a lot of people die in my life. I'm sure you have too, and they've never came to me in dreams or in voices or in EVPs or anything. They're just gone. And then there's some people that die that you weren't even that close to, that come to you in your dream and talk to you. Why is that?
Yeah, and you got to ask the question: is it us? Is there just something in our memory that's bringing these particular folks back? I know exactly what you're saying. Some folks you just never hear of. I've had dreams of certain family members, and others I've never even had any inkling of again. So I understand exactly what you're saying. What do you think? And I'm not going to hold you to this. This is not going to be something we're good. What do you think?
I don't think it's your brain at all. Because I lost a friend. I trained him as a corrections officer. I trained him as a deputy. And while I was on vacation in California, he got hit by a car. And they called me and they said, that Dominic got hit by a car and it's not looking good for him. And they airlifted him out. And it was probably, I don't remember the exact time, but it was probably around 11 o'clock at night. I'm in my motorhome. My wife's asleep. I'm asleep and I have this dream. And it's Dominic. And of course you would dream about Dominic because he just got hit. That's on your mind.
Logical, yeah.
But he comes to me, and that's the second dream I was talking. Like I said in the beginning of the show, I've had 2 clear dreams. That's the second one. He comes to me, and we're in a different part of the state where he grew up, and I went to school, which is about 60 miles away from here. And he's talking to me. He's talking to me about cars because he really loved cars, old cars. And I look at him. I said, Dominic, you do know you're dead, right? And he goes, it's fine. It's okay. And I wake up, and I swear this is the truth. I wake up, and within like 30 seconds, my cell phone rings, and it's my friend Joe. And Joe says, Dominic just passed because he was at the hospital. So coincidence? I don't know. It gives me chills just talking about it right now.
Wow. See, I a long time ago dropped the belief in coincidence. And this is just my opinion. I think there's a connection here somewhere. There's some thread that's connecting all of this, because stuff like that happens just way too often. And you hear, and I've talked to hundreds of people that have experienced things, and they tell stuff just like what you described. They think about somebody, they see them, they see their Aunt Betty, and the next day they get a call, Aunt Betty passed away.
Yep.
And you could sit there and explain, well, it's coincidence, it's just people's minds. But it just happens way too often. So
I think we've lost a lot of our capabilities, our mental capabilities. I think we're much more in tune thousands of years ago. Because how many times have you heard a song in your head and you turn on the radio and the song's on? Yeah. That happens all the time. Somehow we're connected to frequencies. Yeah, we're always, we're just not paying attention. I think we're too busy. We're being bombarded by everything right now. And I think we just kind of lost touch.
Do you think that, this is kind of an off the wall question, but so many of the Native American tribes, as well as other cultures, all have really similar stories? They may have different names for the entities, but their stories are all the same as far as religion. Do you think that's one of the reasons? I guess what I'm getting at is why we had that connectivity early on, and as we got more sophisticated, perhaps we lost it, and maybe that's what
I think it's. Instead of religion, I would call it more spiritual, because religion is a man-made concept. I think spiritualism has always been around, and the natives are, very spiritual. To them, everything has a spirit: trees, the ground, the earth, the sun, the moon, and I kind of lean that way more myself. And but like I said, I think we've lost connection. Somehow we got disconnected, because when I'm outside in the middle of nowhere, sitting, by yourself, it's amazing how you can hear things that you've never thought were out there. It's a different world, and nobody does that anymore. There's a handful of people.
And folks, I'm telling you, go to his part of New Mexico near Moriarty. What other towns are near you?
Oh, we
Moriarty.
get Estancia, Mountain Air, of course there's Albuquerque, the murder capital of the world. You don't want to go there.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you can see Albuquerque from a distance, but where you're at, it's just so open, and there is a spiritual nature to it. In our last few minutes, Ike, where's the future? Where are we heading? Where are we heading with all this, or where should we head?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. The YouTube channel has kind of slowed down. We haven't been very active. You know how it is. I think you put a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, maintaining a channel, and you don't get nothing for it, and there's so many people that are negative about it.
And so many people doing it too.
It brings you down. I mean, why am I even doing this? Just so you can respond to something negative to me? But we're coming back. We're making a comeback.
Well, we're looking forward to it.
Once the snow goes away, we're going to start investigating again and hopefully bring out some new content, some real content.
So tell folks where to find you, how to get a hold of you, and tell them about your contests that you do, which I think are pretty cool. The contest
on YouTube, there's always a contest on YouTube. Usually we give away silver because I'm a big fan of silver. But you can get a hold of us you can follow us on YouTube on IDKPARANORMAL at YouTube, or you can just email me directly at idkparanormal@gmail.com. Please subscribe. It helps a lot when you subscribe to YouTube because it lets you know at least somebody's out there watching. There's so many people that watch my videos. And I'm like, why don't you subscribe? And they're usually cops. Well, I don't want anybody else to know that I'm watching this. I'm like, okay.
What message would you have for folks out there? Do you want them to maybe reach out to you with their stories? Yes.
If you have good stories, and if especially if they're out in my neck of the woods out here, if you have had anything experienced anything out here, please let me know. If you have any haunted places out here that you'd like us to look into, we'll definitely go look at them.
Excellent. Well, and I will do the same if I come up with some ideas, and I'm hoping to get you back here to Florida sometime in the near future. And folks, we're trying to do the same thing with Paranormal Stakeout. If you have questions, thoughts, comments, theories, open to all of it, get a hold of me at Ghost Guy at paranormalstakeout.com. Fill out the form. There'll be a form out there soon, or just send me an email saying, this is what I got. And we're going to talk about them on the show. We'll get your questions on the show. Once again, paranormalfbi.com. That's how you get a hold of me, or IndianRiverHauntings.com, Facebook, and YouTube. So check us out. Stay informed, folks. Be part of the show. Appreciate Ike, you being here tonight. Appreciate you folks listening. And until we meet again, stay safe, and we'll see you on the other side. Have a good night, folks.